And I'm going to just jump in because I don't want to feel pressured for time, and we're kind of there. We really want to honor people that need to leave and such like that. The first night, we unveiled and kind of stepped towards the reforming and some reshaping around our compass statement. We've kind of dumped the term vision, trying to find some language that's a little more, that's very intentional and is just as motivating, hopefully, but maybe discovering not just as a semantics game, but some language that maybe is a little more reflective of who we are as a movement. So our compass is set as a national family to seeking first God's kingdom. We discussed a little bit, and we're not going to drill into this right now, and we'll be talking a lot about this over the next year or so. It'll be the theme in our gathering in Montreal in July. What's the exact dates? I've lost B. B does not stand for Beth. It stands for David and Anita's brain. That's actually B's role. What's our Montreal dates? 23 to 26. I'll be there next week for some evangelical fellowship things, and I'm taking an extra day to hang out with the Montreal community, and we're scoping out the space. We already have it booked. There's a really great large facility right in the heart of Montreal, right downtown, big Pentecostal church that we've been able to secure. We can really shape the environment. It's a very usable space, but we can get upwards to 1,000 people in there. And so however many, few hundred of us gather, we've got lots of room to adjust things and such. And then there's another building that's just right like about a block away, which is one of the oldest Anglican churches in the city of Montreal. And I think it's St. James or something. And we are in dialogue with them about utilizing some of that space as well. We might have a 24/7 boiler room type prayer house in that facility. We're just trying to look at some of these kinds of rhythms that we can have going as we step into that. So our banner and the theme will be the church and the kingdom. And just a little snapshot that was kind of flying through social media a bit Thursday night that apparently I said, and I thought, oh, that's kind of profound. But the center of the kingdom is not the church. It's Jesus. And I think it's really important to remember. There's a theologian, Drew Hart, who is reflecting on this a lot, and he's giving me some helpful language to this, and he makes a distinction between ecclesiology and churchology. And ecclesiology is the call to be the community that Jesus defines and welcomes us into, and that is how Jesus defines his church. When we get obsessed with churchology, we could lose the kingdom in the midst of everything. So you can actually do church really, really well and lose some of those moorings, and then kind of pulling on this thread again of John Wimber stepping into a particular space at a particular time in history. And really, signs and wonders wasn't the bullseye. The bullseye was Jesus wants his church back. And what was the glaring missing thing at that time historically for people like myself? Peter Wagner coined this thing called the third wave. Is that familiar terminology to some of you? It's kind of a wave we call Pentecostalism in the 1920s, 1960s was sort of this move that became coined as charismatics. And then around the late 70s into the 80s and toppling into the 90s was sort of what was identified as the third wave by church observers and people like Peter Wagner, who was sitting at that time at the chair at Fuller Theological Seminary in the church growth and church development chair, and called it the third wave because it was sort of this unique thing of people coming predominantly from cessationist roots, from roots that were just very, very anchored in conservatism, and yet this, what Joyce was saying, this hunger and this pull and this realization, maybe we've been doing a lot of church and we actually haven't had Jesus in the house. So Revelation 3, Christ is standing at the door and knocking. I think most of us are familiar with that not being about evangelism, but it's one of the best verses we can use to get people to do evangelism. But I don't understand how all that works. But it's literally Jesus saying, actually, as Beth was bringing up, to me it's kind of profound. Chris McQueen has been doing a lot of reflection and work around this understanding that we've moved from an altar to a table. And the sort of appeal of Jesus is, I want to come in and sit at the table with you. And as Beth was reminding us today, I want everyone at this table. And it's the kingdom. Jesus wants his church back. And so there was a vacuum at that time of very little awareness of healing, of deliverance, of stepping into that space of authority that Jesus gave us to really reach out. But we would always say, and maybe we forgot, the end game is love, not power. This is not parlor games. This isn't like sort of to create a buzz so the church looks better. This is the call of Jesus himself to step into becoming like him and to walk with him into this place and space of incarnation that brings us right where it's flesh on flesh, life on life, eyeball to eyeball, and walking this thing out together, knowing that God is present to heal and to save. So I think in our current time, we're expanding and being stretched in our understanding of the kingdom. Peter David, some of you might remember Peter. I feel sad, like just full disclosure. I mean, I think he's having fun as a Catholic priest. I hope he is. I think it's awesome, and we're in relationship. I don't know if there's any big. I don't know what happened in our clumsiness as a Vineyard family of stumbling around some of the pitfalls of the charismatic world that had Peter. But some of our Vineyard folk have ended up in some traditions like that, Catholicism, Anglicanism. And then instead of going, what happened to them, go, maybe a better question is why? What was missing in our orientation? What was something that perhaps is in the essence of what we're called to be and yet got lost somehow? And for some, the only place to rediscover it has been in some very traditional settings. But to me, it's not really super surprising. Why would some Vineyard people end up in the Anglican Church, for example? Terry Lamb, who pastored the Abbotsford Vineyard for years, and I think was a significant part of their history of growing to quite a significant size, is now an Anglican vicar. Why? I think I do know why. Because there's this pacing and rhythms in the Anglican liturgy that allows the sweet prophetic essence of who Terry is to just dial it down, be at rest, not be under pressure, to be the dog and pony show, not to have to be the prophetic man of the hour that's going to save the church or save the movement, and he can just move into some ancient rhythms and some stability and some longevity, and just, I mean, that could be oversimplifying things, and I'm most certainly putting words in his mouth this is just my surmising. I didn't call him and say, hey, Terry, I'm going to talk about it, because I didn't intend to do this. But I think these are really good questions. Isn't that what you do when someone leaves your church? Like you sit down, you have a cup of coffee, and you go, look, I'm gonna really try hard. This is gonna be super hard right now. Everything in me is gonna want to be defensive, and I don't want to hear what you have to say, but maybe I just need to listen. And I'm not trying to get you to come back. I don't want to try to convince you in anything. I don't want to leverage power or my title or my position to talk you into anything, but maybe there's something I need to know, and maybe there's nothing. Maybe it's just on a totally different page, just as my computer is starting to do this whole thing again. Lord Jesus, help me. For some reason, it switched to a totally different... There, we should be good again, guys. So again, I don't want to belabor that because time is going. So Peter, some years ago, wrote this in one of our reflections. While we in Vineyard have embraced the kingdom story, We have embraced the version as told by G.E. Ladd 30 years ago, helpful. In fact, when there's people new coming into the vineyard and younger emerging thinkers and leaders, most still to this day will point them to Ladd as one of our resources. It applied mostly to the issues of why we should be doing the deeds of Jesus and why our success rate in doing them is not 100%. In most other aspects of our theology, we have taken over typical evangelical theology, or in some cases, charismatic theology. Now, at the stage when our movement developed, this was a major step forward. It was indeed a third wave of the Spirit, but a step, even a major step, does not make a journey. The road goes ever onward, or to change the metaphor, the wave rolls on beyond us. But the answer, I'm just interjecting into David's thought here, is not now to run after the novel, as we've talked about many times as a family. We don't want to fall off one side into nostalgia, but nor do we want to fall off the other side and now chase the novel. What's the cutting edge of what God is doing in the church? I'm like, forget the cutting edge of the church. I got grooves down my back that that I still have to bandage every day from the cutting edge of the church. Like, you just don't want to live there. But where is the Father at work now? Is this beautiful word that we had. Like, what's happening in this moment? Who are we with you, Jesus, in this moment now? What we need to do is to embrace living the teaching of Jesus, not just doing the deeds. Does anyone remember when Peter wrote this? It was in one of the magazines, and I forgot to put the date on here. This is probably early 2000s. Oh, what does it say there, Hart? Because it's printed in the manual. 2004, so 13 years ago, Peter was prophesying to us. What we need to do now is to embrace living the teaching of Jesus. I was in tension in the worship today. A good tension. Because I agree with the essence of this prophetic wooing. And yet I think this profound awareness that the way is Him, and it is becoming like Him. That is the way. And there are things of His presence and this wooing that we can only find in that parking lot, standing in solidarity with the poor as the city of Langley is crashing down on their head. There are other, so it's not one against the other, right? It's not pitting one, but there is a deeper invitation, and this is a critical moment for us as a movement. And we've so longed for the silver bullet that's going to fall in a meeting somewhere where we just don't have to, as Jared was saying last night, practice or live it. Not just doing the deeds and to appropriate the, hear that? Embrace living the teachings, not just doing the deeds. And to appropriate the updates of the kingdom story, like N.T. Wright. I know some of you aren't N.T. Wright fans. Some of you are. It's not about the people. What have we learned? We're 30, 40 years in. What have we learned? What are the pitfalls? What are the screw-ups? What are the mistakes? What are the things that we are learning? What are the good things? What are the successes? Where are you leading us now, Lord? And show how countercultural or counter this age the teaching and symbolic actions of Jesus really were. Then we need to, so for example, what Peter I think is alluding to here is you have Jesus stepping in to an incredible encounter of physical healing. But what's the context of that most often is by stepping into that space and bringing a physical manifestation of the inbreaking kingdom, he is at the very same time and very intentionally challenging the empire, the systems, the powers, the paradigms, the ways of thought, hence metanoia. Repent! The kingdom is upon you. then we need to apply it consistently to all of our community life. And churchology will never let you go here. It won't. Now, I fight this thing because people go, well, you talk like this, like, you can't do this with hundreds of people in one place. Yes, you can. Dare to dream. Get a little bigger. There's something beautiful about this, and it's a struggle to not have the alligator just swallow up the whole pie. And you get on the grind of just doing church. But I'm telling you this, the kingdom sought first, everything else will be added. And we'll have some small communities. We'll have some, maybe something that we've got to be thinking about in our church in the kingdom thing is, why have we maybe inverted things where we've tried to make the norm the mega church, when the norm could be the parish. But the parish doesn't negate the cathedral. We need all the expressions, we need the Rich Nathans of the world, building a, monstrosity mall of a church that can house, however many thousands and thousands of people. So that Jared can be down in the shadow of the big mothership, faithfully building an order right down in another part of Columbus, Ohio. These things do not war against each other. And that is the beauty of being a family and not a network. What might this look like? Peter Davids asks us 13 years ago and now has left. like we didn't figure it out. But who is left, and how does it look to you now, right? Haggai. How could a full embrace of the kingdom story make us a community effectively apprenticed to our King? Great question, Peter Davids, the Jesus way. Jesus is not suggesting that these are simply timeless truths about the way the world is, about human behavior. If he was saying that, he was wrong. Mourners often go uncomforted. The meek don't inherit the earth. Hello. Those who long for justice frequently take that longing to the grave. This is an upside down world, or perhaps a right way up world, and Jesus is saying that with his work, it's now starting to come true. The time is coming and is now here. Follow me, Jesus said to the first disciples, because in him the living God was doing a new thing, and this list of wonderful news is part of his invitation, part of his summons, part of his way of saying that God is at work in a fresh way, and this is what it looks like. Are we displaying the glory and splendor and beauty of the kingdom as we gather in all, we got epic roofing in Calgary and this crazy faith community swirling around it with Callum and Joyce. We've got, an ice cream shack in Halifax. We got the beauty of the Strathcona Vineyard, bringing a big old school bus in here and probably triggering off the city of Langley. I'm not putting that on you guys, but solidarity, poor with the poor. It's beautiful. It's diverse. It's vibrant. It's fresh. It's a displaying of the glory of the church, as Paul would say. But it's an upside down glory. It's the Jesus way. So the Spirit's been speaking to us. We gathered in February in Edmonton, about 300 or so from across the country. Ruth Rousseau is like this most marvelous curator of a space that really is not driven by agenda, but just comes to seek the face of God. And they've been faithfully for years and years just kind of holding this little fire, right, Karis? Just kind of, how many of you were there like 10 years ago? It was like 8 or something, or 18 or something like that. Like 20. Oh, geez. What's your name, Anita? I'm just kidding. It's like, yay! But faith, and it's slowly the last couple of years, just as we've given attention to prayer and we've kind of fanned that flame a bit, and this is sort of like the fringe group of the vineyard gathering at Edmonton in the freezing cold in February, so a few intercessors can just sort of get an outlet. Like it's not, no, this is burning at the very core of who we are as a movement. seeking the face of God, coming again and again, listening to his heart. That's why we call it pulse, trying to get what he's saying. And the Lord really started stirring these images of health begets health, of coming and turning our face. There was demonic deliverance in the gathering just this last February. I haven't seen that for years, and I'm kind of like, what's up? We had that sort of feeling. Maybe it's what Jesus felt like in the temple when he declares the coming of the kingdom, and the very first response is, ah! Then I had this awful moment where we're praying with part of the national team, and I'm feeling like, okay, we're taking some strides. We're a couple years in now. We've done some heavy work at grassroots, trying to listen to people, just kind of, just getting the, hopefully all the puke is like out of the system. We can kind of now start like mopping the floor and go, okay, what are the next steps? And someone comes with a dream, and it's, it's like she's, up, how dreams are, you're kind of zoning. Mine, I'm always naked. I don't know why, but you're flying somewhere, and you just got this bird's eye view of a bus. And I'm not sure if this was actually accurate, but in my mind, it was this bus kind of, going through the mountain pass and coming closer and closer. And it's a vineyard bus. Thinking, oh, it's a tour bus. Like, this is cool. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's the season we're in. We're going to, just start really hitting the road with this thing. And comes inside the bus and looks around and sees faces from all across the country. And there's just, bodies and body parts and bandages, blood, and I think there was a few smiles, but it's like, we've banished Eeyore conventions from the Canadian National Vineyard, just so you know that. We're not doing Eeyore conventions anymore. But there's kind of this thing, and it's almost like this phrase, it's not a tour bus, it's a triage bus. And I'm like, oh God, I thought we were done. Metanoia last year, Michael Rayburn came up from the Society of Vineyard Scholars and a dear pastor and brought this. We talked a little bit about it the first night, so I won't unpack it. Haggai. Time to come out of your paneled house. And we explained this the first night, but I see some new faces where these aren't bad people. In fact, these are the people that laid everything down. A bunch of dudes stayed in Babylon. It's just too hard to follow the promise this time, because it's like, I got down roots, everything. But there was a group that pulled everything up and courageously made the trek back to Jerusalem. They're really good people. They've sacrificed everything. And they're hungry and they're going for it. But there was one glitch. There was no flipping milk and honey. There's no bumblebees the sizes of, whatever, that are, spreading the wealth. Nothing that was prophesied seemed to be coming to pass. And I don't think I'm not a scholar at that sense, but as I wrestle with the text and the snapshot of Haggai, it's not so much, they're not bad people. Things just keep going. Now I got kids. They really, really like to play soccer, a lot. I got a son, he likes hockey, and there's different things, and these are not bad things. Life just starts getting full, and rhythms just started coming, and there's this slow erosion of disappointment and discouragement that just begins to eat away at your guts. The Lord says, can you come out of your paneled house again? Who among you is left? And the beautiful thing, Haggai sits under this amazing banner. He says, you missed this the last time. In this place, I will grant peace. I'm not inviting you to frenzy. I'm not inviting you to, oh my God, I can't fit one more thing in my schedule. That's churchology. But maybe I'm speaking to you. Maybe I'm calling you to something. And who cares what it looks like, if it's big and flashy, if it ever makes the Elijah list or gets another song on CCLI, who cares? I'm here. I've never left. We've been facing a time of repentance. Some words have come. A time of shift. A time of vulnerability. We gathered our national team together last year in Kenora, about just over a year ago, and there was this prophetic picture of the Lord just coming and opening a drawer. And everything in us was like, no, hold the drawer. Well maybe a little crack. It's like just the Spirit just relentless, opening it right up to the back where there's all the little dust balls and like stuff shoved back there. In the old porn magazine that you thought, crap, I thought I got rid of that. You know, it's like all the stuff stuffed way back in the drawer. He says, it's okay, I'm here. You can do better than this because I'm with you. It's not about performance or doing. I'm with you. And you're going to be like me. You can do this thing. You can do this thing. I am here. I am here. You can do this thing. And as Jared said, in part of our history as the family of Jesus, some people had to like run out to a desert to figure this out. Other times of history, it's been different things. What is our moment right now, and what does it look like for us to get Jesus back at the table? It's a time of rebuilding. Not sure if I mentioned this. I think I did it just in passing. I want to just emphasize, Carol Lovejoy is a First Nations elder and is part of up in the Edmonton Vineyards, and she's part of our national team. We have what we call a national council with Neil and June Black and the Reeses and Carol. And Carol is the fun one on the team because she's like just this beautiful, just free spirit. And she's 76. I thought she was like 72. No, honestly, I thought she was younger. But she is just this, but she's like, we can't get her on email. Like, to invite her to the last national team meeting, we literally had to send her like a snail mail letter, and I'm not even sure she got that. So she's, in fine First Nations form, as you would know. It's like, well, smoke signals will work. It's kind of like. So, Chris, we've got an idea for a podcast because I tend to go on rabbit trails. Carol wants the smoke signals, and she's like got this amazing prophetic gift. So we might start a podcast called Rabbit Trails and Smoke Signals with David and Carol. We'll just like riff on whatever we think the Lord might be saying to the movement right now. But she had her hip go out of joint some time ago, and it was quite painful. She couldn't get stuff together. Couldn't get treatment, eventually she did, but it was quite a ways down the road, and the doctor sat her down and said, okay, you're gonna get this joint back. Like, that's gonna get back in place. There's gonna be some alignment here, but I gotta warn you, most of the therapy and most of the physio that you're gonna have to go through is not for that joint, it's for the rest of the body. Because what the body has done is it's reshaped itself around the thing that's been out of joint and has now convinced itself that's normal. This is not normal. And we're going to feel it right across. Leaders having to adjust and lay down power and maybe some mechanisms and systems that used to work, or really be intentional about, recalibrating some things that are really valuable. And people in our communities just trying to, oh man, you're actually going to really call us to discipleship? Oh, I just thought I just needed to know this stuff, not do this stuff. And there's always a wide space of grace for a huge swath of people to come. And we need communities across the country that have a large open space that will facilitate a lot of people just on a journey. And then there'll be these other orders that can really kind of drill in and be a little more focused and keep challenging the system. One of the greatest, I think, mistakes of the Protestant church is the development of the parachurch. And this bizarre codependency that the local church really isn't doing the kingdom, so it needs the parachurch to do that. But then you kind of hate the parachurch because they keep taking all the money and the really good people that are like actually doing stuff. And then the people that go to the parachurch come back to the church and they don't know how to fit anymore. And we've sort of created this bizarre dysfunction. What's it look like to pull those things not back together in a cookie cutter form, but to learn how to celebrate and to find the rhythms of community and life from the cathedral to the parish and get back to maybe what normal church should be. This is what the Lord God Almighty says. In a little while, I will once more shake the heavens and the earth, the sea and the dry land. I will shake all nations. What is desired by all nations will come. I will fill this house with glory. It's the Haggai word. At this time, Hebrews picks it up. His voice shook the earth, but now he has promised once more. I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken. In your individual life, in the life of your churches, in the life of your discipleship spheres, in the rhythms of your career, in all of these things, are you willing to open your hands and say, Lord, shake? I don't know. I'm really nervous right now because maybe something I thought was really unshakable, you might shake right out of the system. It might be the fire hose that crumbles this hard heart right down to some gravel. And I'm going to be shocked at what goes. And maybe, even more importantly, I'm going to be shocked and terrified by what remains. So that what cannot be shaken may remain. The created things, which isn't about creation, it's not about the beauty around us, it's what are the things we have built with our own hands. And even unwittingly, with no malicious intent or carnality, put the stamp of God on it and given our whole lives to keep building it. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. If you hold on to your life, you will lose it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. For your job, for your paycheck, for your, again, there's all sorts of wisdom and process. But the very essence of stepping to this place, don't be afraid. Let him shake. Worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. As Jared's been telling us through the Beatitudes, what's at a heart level. Where do we need to relinquish power? Where's hiddenness? Wow, that's a big one, huh? All we like to say in the vineyard, we're not about performance. I think we kind of are. God's got this. Trust for my own life. Entrust others to God's care. Listen to what the Lord says. Stand up. Plead my case before the mountains. Let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth, for the Lord is a case. What have I done to you? How have I burdened you? Answer me. Remember what Balak the king of Moab plotted and what Balaam the son of Beor answered. This crazy little story that naughty Christians like to quote. Oh, God spoke through an ass. You know, we have our little jokes about the ass that spoke, you know. Remember your journey and, oh yeah, Barry, you're the one that told me that joke. No. Remember your journey. Here's another problem word. Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Who are you, God? I thought you weren't like the pagan gods. I've just been on this grind. I've been trying to do this thing so hard for so long. I'm absolutely exhausted. And all I hear is you asking for more. Who are you? What is this thing? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To serve in Sunday school? To set up the chairs? I don't know. If that's the starting place, you're going to burn out on this thing like way early. And the power of community is the ebb and flow of service. But what does he draw us to? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. This is the quintessence of the commandments as the prophets understood them. The finest summary of the content of practical religion to be found in the Old Testament. The rabbis who commented on this verse in the early centuries of the Christian era called it a one-line summary of the whole law. So then how does Jesus summarize it? We love to put it on the banners of the church. What's that? Oh, good. Any motion of your arm, I assume, is this. So I was thinking I needed to stop. But she was actually encouraging me. I love it, babe. I love it. Spontaneous dance party. Oh, just go. No. Wow, that's amazing. For sure, I thought you went. Oh. So the rabbis who commented on this verse in the early centuries of the Christian era called it a one-line summary of the whole law. Love God and love people. But you got to get into some of the ethos of Micah and actually the Sermon on the Mount to kind of unwrap that a bit more. We've made that such a bumper sticker thing. And it's a great place to start. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't know. That's the beauty of this thing of not judging. Like, who cares? Like Paul says, as long as Jesus is being preached, I can't stress out about this, but I got to be faithful to what I know God's asking me to do. And that's all we're trying to discern as the Vineyard family. What's our lane? And let's just do it well. My people, remember what Balak, the king of Moab, plotted and what Balaam, the son of Beor, answered. Keel and Delish say, since God, as the unchangeable one, cannot utterly destroy his chosen people or abolish or reverse his purpose of salvation after destroying the sinful kingdom, this is embedded in Micah. He will set up the new and genuine kingdom of God. The sermon, the Beatitudes. This is why when you see the branding around Health Begets Health, we have Micah becoming communities of humility, mercy, and justice. There's some thought in this. There's some intentionality. There's some prayer. There's some stuff the Spirit's been speaking to us. On that day, will I set up the fallen hut of David, and will wall up their rents. So if we may be so bold, what does this mean for the Vineyard tent? Wall up our rents, Lord. Sew up the rips in the walls. And what is destroyed thereof I will set up and build it as in the days of eternity. But the word build here in the Hebrew does not mean to build as in from scratch. And that's some of the weakness. I think it's an Achilles heel of charismatic thought. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Doesn't mean you discard everything that was before. But we kind of think that, right? And that's what gets us in sort of this trajectory of chasing novelty. It's to carry on, to enlarge, to beautify what the Lord has begun. It's to expand, to step in, and where there is rending and where there is brokenness, to repair. And so we're going to be okay if we don't grow faint. This isn't about scrapping everything and trying to start something new. This isn't about, oh my goodness, we suck and we just got to end it all and we got to join the next great sort of cutting edge of whatever God is doing in the church. Now, you might be called to a different community and you feel much more comfortable in your own skin in a different way of expressing the faith, but that's the beauty of the whole body. That's why in the Vineyard we've got to get better at, but it's deep in our sensibility to love the whole church. We don't have it all. We don't need it all. We don't want it all. But we want to be faithful. Lord, what are you building? And then the sukkah, this hut. You might be familiar with the Feast of Tabernacles. This is one of the most prophetic and profound images in the rhythms of the gatherings and the celebrations of the people of God. It's a hut. It's a tent. That is the glory of God. It is the upside down, absolutely audacious and yet hope-filled and liberating freedom of the gospel. Everybody can get in an old tent. You start building palaces, you got hierarchy, you got where do the poor sit, where do they not sit, you've got, there's some conferences now where if you pay extra on a registration, you buy a lunch with one of the main speakers. I am not kidding you. That's a palace. And it's not the kingdom. It indicates by way of contrast to Baith, which is the house or palace, which David built for himself. I have a dear friend, Avner Bosky, who was a ghostwriter for John Wimber back in the day and became very close with Mike Bickle, and he's just an amazing guy. And I was in Jerusalem some years ago, and it was so good to go off the beaten path. He's born in Montreal, Jewish, pure Jew from family, and he felt to go back. And we're standing in this one place, and he says, David, look down over there. You see you see that sort of little lump? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you know what that is? I says, what? Mount Zion. I'm not kidding. He says the West and the modern church has so glorified. I mean, in our minds, Mount Zion is like, all us poor Canadians looking over the border. Oh, if we only had a Mount Baker. It's kind of like you kind of have this longing, romanticized sort of understanding. And against, this was the upside down, collision of Israel with all the pagan powers around her. God's saying, I'm going to establish something so glorious and so beautiful, and it's going to be completely unlike anything else. It's not going to be leveraged through power, but through humility. After this, I will return and rebuild David's fallen tent. Its ruins I will rebuild, and I will restore it, that the rest of mankind may see the Lord, even all Gentiles who bear my name, says the Lord who does these things. Who wrote this? The half-brother of Jesus, quoting the prophecy of Amos. James says this in the book of Acts. James would later pen an epistle that would be one of the clearest diatribes regarding health within kingdom community, where mercy, justice, and humility were to be the norm, a true religion of inclusion and grace. Non-prejudicial, where orphans and widows were safe, and the poor, in the eyes of the world, James makes very clear, could find refuge. A tent, not a palace. What's it look like for us to step away from our paneled existence into the Jesus way? And I think, Jared, it'd be maybe good to talk about this together, and maybe some of us, but also from our paneled existence into the Jesus community. I'm not sure as individuals I don't think we can do it alone. And I think if the weight of you having to give everything you have away to those, which, man, that's your wrestle and you got to go, and we're in the same wrestle. But I think there's something beautiful about when we see it within the rhythms of a community, as you were inviting us to. What would it look like if we were all here? But we're not, one of the phrases we're using nationally right now is we come together because we can't make it alone. And so what's it look like in those moments where you are stretched to the end? But it'll never happen as this is just relegated to Martha, who runs the soup kitchen, or Fred, who's got a burden for the prison, or it's got to be in the rhythms of our community, a called out community or assembly, wherever it's referred to in the Bible, for it was a very common word in Greek society. It refers to people who form and shape an assembly, not the infrastructure, physical meeting space, or the constitution and bylaws that govern them. It can be a mob. That's how most pastors feel. The children of Israel and the body of Christ. We are not being invited into simply supporting programs, playing church, and institutionalized religion. We are called out into the Jesus way, but into the Jesus community. Into radical community, a new social order, the church that the very gates of hell cannot prevail against. We are to step out of our paneled house existence into his kingdom community, discovering together who Jesus is calling us to be in our cities, in our nation, in this world. There's an N.T. Wright reflection here that was never in the psyche of the early church to be seen as an institution. It was always a family. Lloyd Rankin, our national director in New Zealand, is a beautiful little thing here. I won't read it to you. Just the difference between a network and a tribe, a clan, a family. Sometimes we get really insecure, and because we do have to get better at organization, we think the answer is now to form more of a network, and the vineyard sucks at being a network because it's not our DNA. It's not how we're wired. A network can't do what we did in the third space last night and have Grace, was it Grace Scott? Just launch, just lay down this great folk tune with McQueen, and the whole community just cheering, like that's family, that's tribe, and it takes intentionality, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time to go, what we're gonna think about, where are these carpets gonna sit, how are we gonna, Leith went out and just, he took his track pants and stretched them in the back corner over there. I'm just making a joke. Leith isn't here, so he can't defend himself. But he told me that's spandex. What a cool idea. And of course, you can do that when you're doing a meeting and you want a space. But there's something that gets into the fabric when this is about calling family together, celebrating. Let's kick it up. Let's get some great sound. Let's get some thoughtful teaching. Let's take the effort and time to get some great food and make sure the music is right. But it's not about to impress anybody or to not get, our heinies whipped by the village church. Let's just step in and be faithful to who we are. Whatever. So here's what it might look. Now Anita's given me this. Living in generosity. Open space, open hands, open hearts. We got a lot of kinks in the hose at local level, regional, but it's opening up. Bob Hughes was so excited. He dropped an email to the board a couple days ago. He goes, man, I can't remember this happening, and I don't know how it's happening because we got so much rebuilding to do. But the money that's coming in nationally, just from the local churches giving, we're at 107% over what we budgeted. And we increased the budget this year. Give us that. And it's not because we're beating up local churches to give their 5%. Most of us are just going, let's forget that. I don't know, we need some kind of guidelines, but what about, let's just discover what it means to be generous. I don't want to put them on the spot, but You guys, like the Lagores just sent in a little whack of cash a couple days ago. It's because hey, we got a little extra. Let's just throw it in. Honestly, this is tribe. This is community. A network, you pay your dues, and you better give me something back, or I'm going to not show up to the meeting, and I might just stop paying. And that's fair if that's the wiring. If that's the negotiated agreement coming in. It's not our family. It's not who we are. If you can't give this month, it's okay. It's really okay. Let's find out how to help each other. Let's take an offering to get this roof fixed, for God's sake. Amen. It's like, amen. Yeah. I don't know, Old Bob Jones, an old prophetic voice that was in our movement for some time. It was a little crazy. We lived with him and is just down the street for 3 years. We used to say, where's the kink in the hose? Sharing versus giving. This is something I think we need to explore from coast to coast. Most of our modern church methods are based on a giving model. There's something there. But sharing, I think, might be more healthy. And it helps us avoid the pitfalls of codependency. Cultivate walking in authority. There is no need to leverage power. We are given authority. We receive power when the Spirit comes upon us. We have authority because Jesus has given to us. We don't have to be belligerent. We don't have to be contending. We don't have to be reaching. We don't have to be pushing people over. We don't have to be desperate to get our word heard. We just have authority. We step in and do the works of Jesus Christ. And when his power comes, we ride that wave all the way. But when there's no power, we still pray. Authority is somewhat different than power. It's the right to use power. And Gary Best has got some great reflections on this in Naturally Supernatural. To a world besotted with power, God reveals himself in the power of love. This taps a little bit some of what Jared was saying yesterday. Salvation is baptism into reality, out of the world of illusions, delusions, ideas, and ideals. Salvation is an immersion into the real. The truth at the dirt floor bottom of us is that we are weak, dependent, and small, but infinitely loved. Generosity, sharing, patience. The step-by-step path of wisdom sustains us on this narrow way. The reach for the silver bullet and the quick fix requires a wide road for lane changes, passing others, and room for speed. Slow down. Remember Jesus? There's a narrow way and a broad way. We've made that about whether you smoke or drink or swear and all that stuff. I don't think it's about that. The reaction to change is primarily grief. Ezra 3:13, the wall is being rebuilt. In moments of change and realignment and the Spirit at work and when things are happening, there's an interesting dynamic. No one could distinguish the sounds of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping because the people made so much noise. And the sound was heard far away. The sound of laughter was at the same volume as the sound of absolute anguish and weeping. If we are going to be a healthy community, we've got to learn to let those sounds bleed together and form a new song of praise. And then meekness, the beauty of restraint and impact of serving. You won't lose. You won't lose. You will inherit. We don't reach. We don't grab. We don't leverage power. We will inherit. Too much stuff. It's a tent, not a palace. I was going to read this out, but time is gone, and I've done it in several settings, but if you flip, Hart, maybe you can help me. Is it on the back, I think it's of one of the pages, is the 10 resonance things of the vineyard. And there's some really thoughtful stuff in the manual. It's not just like a little bulletin or sort of a throwaway thing. Like there's some articles, there's some thoughts. And grab that Dallas Willard thing. It is one of the most profound things for us living in the vision of God. We're going to be okay. God is with us. We are okay. That's good. We are okay. We're going to grow, we're going to learn, we're going to repent, we're going to be stretched, but we are okay. So let's open our hands. Lord,